The next surah is Surah An-Naml, the ants. Allah says, Tawseen, tilka āyāt al-Qur'ani wa kitābim mubīn, hudan wa bushra lil-mu'minīn, alladhīna yuqīmūna as-salāh wa yu'tūna az-zakāh, wa hum bil-ākhirati hum yuqinūn, inna alladhīna lā yu'minūna bil-ākhirah, zayyannā lahum a'mālahum, fahum ya'mahūn, ulā'ika alladhīna lahum sū'ul 'adāb, wa hum fil-ākhirati humul akhsarūn. Wa hum fil-ākhirati humul akhsarūn. Tawseen. These are the signs of the Qur'an, a book that makes things clear, guidance and good news for the believers, those who observe the prayers and give charity regularly and are certain of the hereafter. As for those who do not believe in the hereafter, we made their deeds appear good to them, so they wander aimlessly. It is they who will receive the grievous punishment, and in the hereafter they will be the greatest losers. So this is the beginning of the surah. This is the beginning of the surah. But this surah, mashallah, is also important and gives us many meanings. And it's called, this surah is revealed in Makkatul Mukarram. This surah is revealed in Makkatul Mukarram. In the beginning, again it talks a little, partially about Sayyidina Musa alayhi salam. Then after that, Sayyidina Dawood alayhi salam and Sulayman alayhi salam. With the concentration of a theme, the theme of this surah would be, according to my understanding, remember, whatever I give you, that is my understanding of reading the Tafseer and the scholars, statements of the scholars. It's not written somewhere in Tafseer. I come to the conclusion this is supposed to be the theme of this surah by reading the different statements of the scholars and the Mufassirun and the Tafseer of the Qur'an. And then I try to bring the stories or the ayahs and the verses under that theme. And it's easier for us to understand. So for this surah, according to my limited knowledge, the theme of this surah is the supremacy of the civilization. Civilization, highest civilization. How some civilization or some culture would reach to its peak. How will you be considered a civilized person, a civilized community, a civilized ummah, a civilized people? How? So this surah will give you the aspects of civilization. And this surah will tell you these are some aspects, these are some areas. If you are experts in these areas, no matter wherever you are living, so you will be considered as a civilized person. As a civilized person. And your nation will be considered as a civilized nation. Your ummah will be considered as a civilized ummah. As a civilized ummah. So this surah gives us this notion of the civilization. So Sayyidina Sulayman alayhi salam is a king prophet. He is a civilized person, a civilized prophet. All the prophets alayhi salam are civilized, of course, but in a dunyavi way, I mean according to our language of the time. So his civilization contains the aspect of the civilization. So the idea of the highest civilization, or the aspect of the highest civilization, is reflected in this surah in the light of the story of Sayyidina Sulayman and Dawood alayhi salam, particularly Sayyidina Sulayman alayhi salam. So the first thing, in order to be a civilized, in order to have the civilized culture or community, what you have to have? You have to have the knowledge. You must hold the knowledge. That's why sometimes you read ancient Greek, the philosophers. they were the civilized community because of the philosophy, center of the philosophy. The philosophers, they emerged in ancient Greece. Then in some time in history, we the Muslims were the civilized. When we were ruling in Spain and when we were ruling in subcontinent. So we were the civilized person. Our scholars, mashayikh, art, culture, philosophy, Quran, hadith, sunnah, mantiq, logic, mathematics, all we were possessing at some time in history. We were on peak, we were expert in all of that. And this surah is showing that as long as you will be holding this position, you will be respected because you are the civilized person. So the first thing is the knowledge. All kinds of knowledge. Knowledge of deen, knowledge of dunya. Knowledge of deen and knowledge of dunya. So Allah says, وَلَقَدْ آتَيْنَا دَاوُودَ وَسُلَيْمَانَ عِلْمًا وَقَالَ الْحَمْدُ لِلَّهِ الَّذِي فَضَّلَنَا عَلَى كَثِيرٍ مِّنْ عِبَادِهِ الْمُؤْمِنِينَ. Ayah number 15. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave this knowledge to Sayyidina Sulayman and Dawood alayhi salam. And we gave Dawood and Sulayman knowledge. They said, praise to God who has favored us over many of his believing servants. So they are given favor over many other believers. And Sulayman or Solomon succeeded Dawood alayhi salam. He said, O people, we were taught the language of birds and we were given from everything. This is indeed a real blessing. This is indeed a real blessing. So he was succeeded or successor of Dawood alayhi salam. He is the successor of Dawood alayhi salam. Possessed the knowledge of Dawood alayhi salam. The knowledge of Dawood alayhi salam transferred to Sulayman alayhi salam. So he is the successor. That's why Rasul alayhi salam reminds us, Al-Anbiya la yuwarrithuna dirhaman wala dinara. They do not leave the dirham or the dinar, but the knowledge. So the heirs of Prophets alayhi salam is the knowledge. Or this is the inheritance of the Prophets alayhi salam, the knowledge. So Sayyidina Dawood alayhi Sayyidina Sulayman is given this aspect of culture, the knowledge. And then he was given, mashallah, because he is a king, system. He knows the system, how to run the world, how to run the society. All this. If you read his story, because there is not much time, so if you go in detail, Sayyidina Dawood or Sulayman alayhi salam is given each and everything, control over each and everything, and all kinds of favor. The birds, the jinn, the human being, and each and everything is serving to Sayyidina Sulayman alayhi salam. So he is organizing well also. Organizing is skill of Sayyidina Sulayman alayhi salam. And he knows about all armies, all his servants, all those who is in his service. He knows all of them. All of them. So وَتَفَقَّدَ الطَّيْرَ فَقَالَ مَا لِيَ لَا أَرَى الْهُدْهُدْ أَمْ كَانَ مِنَ الْغَائِبِينَ. Sometimes he did not see hoopoe or the bird, so he was looking for them. So he knows, because he's a leader, he knows all that. And then whoever is working for the king, for the leader, the one who formed the civilization, they must be sincere. They must be positive. They must be sincere and positive. Like this bird, this hoopoe, he is bringing the information. There is a queen who is not worshipping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and she is worshipping some idols. She is a mushrika. Now Sayyidina Sulayman, as a former of this civilization, or someone who is forming the civilization, he confirmed this news. سَنَنْظُرْ أَصَدَقْتَ أَمْ كُنْتَ مِنَ الْكَاذِبِينَ. Are you true in your statement or not? اذهب بكتابي هذا فألقي إليهم. Ayah number 27 and 28. Take this letter and go to him. ثم تولى عنهم فانظر ماذا يرجعون. Then we will see. So all this is story. And then she is talking to, when she received this letter, she is talking to her people. أيها الملأ إني أفتوني في أمري ما كنت قاطعة أمرا حتى تشهدون إني ألقي إلي من سليمان وإنه بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. This letter I received. Now you all have to give me mashwara, advice. So the importance of mashwara and shura. And then the power. So you have knowledge, you have the politics, and then you have the power, and then you hold the technology of the time. Technology of the time. What was the technology of Sayyidina Sulayman alayhi salam? Yes. Ya ayyuhal malau ayyukum ya'tini bi'arshiha qabla an ya'tuni muslimin. Who can bring her throne? So the person, mashallah, someone says, Ifritu min al-jinni ana atika bihi qabla an taquma min maqamik. Before you even stand up from your own place, I can bring her throne. And another one says, عِنْدَهُ عِلْمٌ مِنَ الْكِتَابِ أَنَا آتِيكَ بِهِ قَبْلَ أَنْ يَرْتَدَّ إِلَيْكَ طَرْفُ. Ayah number 38, 240. Even before your blinking of eyes, I can bring her. And it happens. Then Sayyidina Sulayman alayhi salam, thanks to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And she comes, when she saw the Sayyidina Sulayman's kingdom of Sayyidina Sulayman alayhi salam, castle of Sayyidina Sulayman alayhi salam, she was amazed. And finally she accepted Islam. So the idea is the civilization. The idea is the civilization, how it forms. And what does it need? So whatever it requires, Sayyidina Sulayman alayhi salam has all that requirements. Even this ant, the story of that ant, which was civilized, this ant under the kingdom of Sayyidina Sulayman alayhi salam. When she talks, Ya ayyuhan namlu udkhulu masakinakum la yahtimannakum Sulaymana wa junuduhu wa hum la yash'urun. Ayah number 18. Ya ayyuhan namlu udkhulu masakinakum. يا أيها حتى إذا أتوا على واد النمل قالت نملة يا أيها النمل ادخلوا مساكنكم. Until when they came up the valley of ants, and ants said, O ants, go into your nests, in your nests, lest Solomon and his troops crush you without noticing. He smiled, Sayyidina Sulayman alayhi salam, when he heard his smile and laughed at her words. So look, this ants was civilized. How it was civilized? She says, لا يحتمنكم سليمان وجنوده وهم لا يشعرون. They may crush you. They may crush you, but what? How? Intentionally? Knowingly? No, not at all. Go into your nests, lest Sulayman and his troops crush you without noticing. Can you imagine? Imagine the talk of these ants. Talk of these ants without noticing. وَهُمْ لَا يَشْعُرُونَ. The troop of Sulayman is coming. This is the manifestation of civilization. An animal, an ant, living in the time of Sulayman alayhi salam. And she is talking, or they are talking, without noticing. So, the brothers and sisters, this surah, the theme of this surah is the civilization. Peak of the civilization was, Sayyidina Sulayman was on its peak. So we are also commanded and told through this surah that we must be civilized. Meaning, we must have the knowledge, we must have the the knowledge, we must have the politics, we must have the power, we must know how to run the system. We must know how to run the system. All these aspects of civilization. And then finally some of the prophets, alayhimus salam. And then very interestingly, very importantly, when you are civilized, don't think and you hold, I mean by civilization, you hold all these aspects. So you should not think that you are your own. You are your own. And because of you, your own capability, you are holding all this power and knowledge. No. The trust is on Allah. أَمَّنْ خَلَقَ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ وَأَنزَلَ لَكُم مِّنَ السَّمَاءِ مَاءً فَأَنبَتْنَا فِيهَا حَدَائِقَ. Interesting words. Ayat number 60, 61, 62, 63, 68, 65. In all until the 64. Allah is asking. Ask them, who created this? Who does this? Who does that? So they all will say, Allah, 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 in the answer of all these things. Who created this? Allah. Who did this? Allah. Who did that? Allah. So you must, in order to have the real and sincere civilization, you must put your trust on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And finally, this surah ends with some idea of the day of judgment, or the sign of the day of judgment. With the sign of the day of the judgment. You should know that, and you should follow my YouTube channel. I talked about them all. The last few ayats, these are the signs of the day of judgment. I talked about them all, and I have the different clips on that. So you will go there and listen if you have time, whenever you have time. But here I would like to stop. The idea in this surah is the civilization, and the first surah, Surah al-Shura, the idea was the language of the time or medium of the time. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forgive us and protect us.